Good morning. It is the 6th of November and we're going to be going through the latest AI news and updates of the day, as well as answering questions from the live audience. We have a handful of decent sized stories today, nothing major, more on the speculative side. So I'm going to also be doing a section on context engineering, which is one of the new terms that you need to get a grasp of if you're using AI on a daily basis. So we're going to be looking at the leaked possible size of Gemini 3. We're going to be looking at Microsoft's plans to launch data centers into space. So it's getting very sci-fi. Speaking of sci-fi, we're going to look at China's new robot, which we just got unveiled yesterday, the Iron, which is incredibly impressive and also relatively cost effective. And then we're going to be looking at context engineering, what that is, how it's different to prompt engineering, and whether or not it's something that you need to learn about. And I'm going to be giving you some resources that you can take away in order to find out more about that. But let's jump in first with a bit of speculative news. The potential leaking of the size of Gemini 3. So there was a Reuters article talking about Siri. Siri is being updated in March 2026, so 4 months from now, give or take 4 or 5 months. Finally, after 14 years, Siri is going to be upgraded from a natural language processing AI, a very early form of AI, to a large language model based. So it's going to be based on generative AI instead. So Siri might actually become useful. What we heard yesterday is that Apple are not going to be using Anthropic, so they're not putting Claude into Siri, but instead they're going to be using Google. And Reuters put out an article saying, as it says, Apple plans to use a 1.2 trillion parameter artificial intelligence model developed by Google. So it looks like Reuters have accidentally leaked the size of the model. We don't know exactly where they got this information from. Oh, I'm sorry. Reuters are reporting on Bloomberg News. So Bloomberg News are the ones who broke the story, and apparently it's a 1.2 trillion parameter model. So that gives us an idea of the size of the model that's going to be used. It also gives us an idea of what Gemini 3 is going to be, because we assume that Siri is going to be built on Gemini 3, which is the as of yet unreleased new version of Gemini. We're currently on 2.5. So Lisan Al-Gaib from June, no relationship I'm sure, is wondering whether this is Gemini 3 Ultra or Gemini 3 Pro. And they're saying it sounds too big for Pro, but too small for Ultra. But since models just get sparser and sparser, I believe it's Pro, and very similar to Kimi K2 1.2 trillion at 30B. So what we're talking about here is the model size, and one way that we measure that is via the parameters. Without getting too much into the detail, through the kind of transformer layers, we have layers within the model which have lots of knobs and dials, which are basically linear algebra, lots of numbers that can be twisted and turned when we are training the model in order to give us certain outputs for certain inputs. It's just kind of how the transform architecture and large language models as a whole work. And we have found so far that the more parameters you have, generally the better the model is. So for the last couple of years, all of the model creators, everyone building base level models, we're talking OpenAI, we're talking Google, Anthropic, XAI, etc. They've just been making their models larger and larger and larger, and that means adding more and more parameters. It's more complicated than that, but parameters are one of the measures we use. So the fact that Google 3 Pro is potentially 1.2 trillion parameters gives us an idea of the sophistication of the model. Again, parameters are not everything, but it is a way that we can test, or we can measure how good the model is going to be. Massively oversimplifying here. So you might be thinking, well, 1.2 trillion, is that a lot? It sounds like a lot. So what's useful is to compare it to other models. We do not know how big ChatGPT or GPT-5 or Sonnet 4.2 or any of those other base level models, we do not know how big they are. There is an estimate that GPT-5 is around 1.7 trillion parameters, which would make this model that we're looking at from Google smaller than GPT-5. Doesn't necessarily mean it's not as good. They could be more efficient, but this is just a way that we can measure it. We do not actually know how big GPT-5 is, though. What we do know is the size of the open source models, because open source models publish their weights. That's kind of, sorry, their parameters, and that's kind of what the open sourcing is. It's giving you all of the parameters, it's giving you the weights and the biases. So we have a model right now which came out relatively recently, last couple of weeks, I think, Kimi K2, which has 1.2 or 1 trillion parameters, I think. DeepSeek V1.2 is, what's that, 68, so about 70 billion. And this is generally the size of the models that we're dealing with in the open source. We've got 70 billion, 40 billion, or 4. Yeah, so I'm twisting my head because I'm looking at them. Quen is, this is really hard to read. Quen is 235 billion. The ChatGPT, GPT OSS, which is ChatGPT's open source model, is 120 billion. So that gives you an idea of the kind of power that you can get from one of those models, and what we're looking at with Gemini 3. It's going to be better, more parameters, so potentially better than a lot of the open source models out there, and maybe at the level of GPT-5. Again, though, this is just one way of measuring it, so we just have to wait and see. But this is the only kind of news that we've had about Gemini 3 recently. There have been lots of rumors swirling around that it's going to be released soon, and it hasn't been, but it looks like, because it's been built into this Siri model that is coming out in March 2026, they've let slip that it's a 1.2 trillion parameter model. Generally, the companies pushing out commercial models, so ChatGPT, Anthropic, Gemini, normally they don't talk about the size of the model, so this is definitely a slip for sure. Somebody has messed up. I'm going to hop over to some questions. Do you think they're getting better, or do you think we're reaching a plateau? I mean, they're definitely getting better at the moment. Every new model that we get is substantially better. What I'm going to talk about later on in this live, though, is context engineering. So the size of the model itself, they're already pretty good, and they're all really good. And every single model that comes out, the difference between them is not that large, but that's kind of limited by our usage. We are not smart enough to necessarily use every part of the model. So increasingly, it's not about the size of the model, it's not about the intelligence of the model, it's not about the number of parameters, it's about tooling, it's about what is connected to that model and what that model can use for us. So I'm going to be talking about the transition from prompt engineering to context engineering, which very basically goes from prompt engineering is us telling the model what we want it to do. Context engineering is the model working out what we want without us necessarily having to articulate that ourselves. So it reduces the reliance on human intelligence, and ideally we'll get to a point where we can just kind of give it some rough instructions, and these models will be able to work out the best way to carry out those tasks for us, because they're getting smarter than us in a lot of domains. So I think plateau-wise, no, we are not hitting it so far. I know there's a lot of speculation about it, but I think the next steps will be in architecture and in tooling, allowing these models to sit in the middle of an ecosystem, which gives them a lot more access to information, to context, to what we're working on. I mean, you already see this. You can actually run a very small model like Haiku, or even a lower ChatGPT version. You can run them in your applications, but as long as you give it access to the internet, for example, and you give it access to, or RAG, retrieval augmented generation, which is a database, basically, they can outperform the really powerful cutting edge models, because you're giving them more to work with. So it's not all about power, it's not all about speed, it's about the tooling and the context around it. And I think that's where we're moving in terms of development, and that's going to make AIs a lot more useful moving forward. We're still fairly early in that in terms of agentic and context engineering. That's where the exciting stuff is happening too. Just scrolling up to see any more questions. Oh, what's that? Unfortunately, I'm wearing a white t-shirt and the whiting is right, which is Not ideal. I heard Gemini 3 won't be SOTA. Oh, very interesting. I'd love to know more about that. I'm very interested to see what they're cooking with Gemini 3. They're obviously not just pushing a model out the door, but they are working on something I hope that's going to be exciting, because a lot of the new models recently in the last few months have been good, solid, but nothing overly exciting. What's your take on ChatGPT financials? What financials? So this, I assume, is in reference to the IPO and the interview that Sam Altman gave. Was it last week when he was talking to a VC? I've forgotten the guy's name. Dan. I've forgotten his name totally. But he was asked in an interview, and Sam Altman is sitting there with Satya Nadella from Microsoft, and Sam Altman is sitting there, and he's asked like, "Hey, you're asking for $1 trillion for your IPO. You want to raise $1 trillion. It's going to be the largest IPO in history. You're looking to bring in a huge amount of cash, and you're saying that you need to do this just to get to profitability. However, your company is currently making somewhere in the tens of billions in terms of revenue, and is totally non-profitable. There's a mismatch here. So you're asking for an obscene amount of cash, and your company right now is just not making enough revenue to come anywhere near justifying this kind of valuation, and this amount of raise. And you're saying to us that you need $1 trillion to make this sustainable and to make this into a business that can kind of push forward and go ahead." And the interviewer is like, "You understand this is it doesn't match up. There's something wrong here." And instead of kind of just making something up, you know how CEOs are. CEOs are good at bullshitting, basically. He could have come up with something about exponential growth or AGI, or we're entering a new type of financial paradigm, etc. He could have come up with some guff. He didn't. Sam Altman just said, "I'm sick and tired of hearing about revenue," and he basically snapped back, and it was a really catty answer, basically saying, I'm not going to talk about revenue, this is irrelevant, etc. And he was sitting there in front of the head of Microsoft, who was also in this interview, because Microsoft are kind of the people that Sam Altman needs to convince that this is worth the money, because Microsoft and OpenAI are so indelibly kind of linked up. I think Microsoft now own 27% of ChatGPT, so OpenAI, after the for-profit conversion. So I think this is a big question. The amount of cash they need to make, the amount of revenue and the amount of profit is phenomenal. It is not unheard of for businesses, especially in tech, to not make a profit for many, many years. I think Amazon took 12 years before it turned a profit, but that was strategic. It was on purpose, because when you don't make a profit, you don't pay taxes. So you can continue to reinvest and grow and grow and grow and grow. And in the case of Amazon, it allowed them to become this behemoth that basically dominates all e-commerce. They crushed all competition. They crushed the high street. They removed all of the competitors, and then they're like, okay, now we're going to turn a profit, once they owned the market. It's harder to make the argument that OpenAI will be able to pull off something like this, because it's just a different type of product. We can switch platforms very easily. So I think financial wise, we're probably in a bubble, and there will probably be a reset. I do not think that undermines the technology. So a lot of people say, oh, I hate AI and I'm looking forward to the bubble popping, and then we can stop worrying about artificial intelligence. I just need to turn on my fan. And we don't need to worry about AI because it's all going to go away. Artificial intelligence is not going anywhere. Generative AI. It's a useful technology that now about 10% or more of humanity are using on a daily basis. Not because it's a fad, but because it's genuinely valuable for them. And we're starting to see research showing that it is actually producing a return on investment in businesses as well, because we had that MIT research from a couple of months ago, which was junk, saying that 95% of pilot projects fail. That was a really flawed study, because it only looked at top-down flagship projects, things that were coming from leadership, and leaders were like, we need AI, do AI, and it was trash projects. Whereas what we're seeing is when AI is adopted at the grassroots level by people who know what they're doing in a job, they know the workflow, and they know how AI can help with that, then it's really useful. So we have a new Wharton study which came out last week, which shows us a more accurate picture. Because I know most of you watching this, and I know for myself, I've increased my productivity by, I don't even want to say tenfold, probably 100-fold. I was up until midnight last night building a piece of software which works. It's something that I'm going to be taking to market, which I would not have been able to do prior to artificial intelligence. So anecdotally, a lot of us at the base level, we are seeing huge productivity gains and the ability to build and to create. So it just doesn't match up that businesses are not seeing this. So we are seeing AI helping. So the technology itself is going to be sound, but for OpenAI, who are trying to raise $1 trillion, which is an insane amount for an IPO. Sorry, they're trying to raise, they're going for a valuation of 1 trillion. I think that there will be a financial correction. And unfortunately, OpenAI is connected to everybody. So they have deals with Amazon, they have deals with Microsoft, they have deals with Nvidia, Oracle, etc. Everything is interlinked with OpenAI, and if they don't deliver, it's going to be a nasty, nasty correction. It'll probably make 2007 look like a child's play, unfortunately. I work quite deep in the AI industry, and Google have been playing catch up. Yeah, as far as I know, I think that's very fair. I think Google are in a weird position because generative AI is, I think they accept the future, but it is also a massive threat to their business model. So Google is primarily an advertising company. It makes about 70 to 80% of their revenue from running ads on search. So search is their cash cow. That's where they make money. Generative AI as a whole, as a technology, is a threat to the paradigm of search. So instead of searching for information, indexed information, which is what we've been doing for, since the beginning of the internet, basically. Instead of that, we can now generate it because we've used the internet as the training corpus for generative AI. So I think Google recognizes that, oh crap, this is going to be a problem, because they currently make 70-80% of their revenue from search. It doesn't come from cloud computing, that's about 12%. It doesn't come from Android, it doesn't come from Gmail or any of those products. Those are just ecosystem products which bring us into their ecosystem. It comes from advertising. So Google know that they need to slaughter their cash cow, search marketing, search advertising, and get on board with generative AI. But if they go too fast, they'll be slaughtering their cow too early and they'll run out of cash. And if they go too slow, they're going to have their lunch eaten by OpenAI. So Google are in a very unenviable position. Thankfully, they have some of the best researchers on earth. They have the ability to take a lot of product to market. Too many products sometimes, like their coding tools. They have about 7 or 8 different vibe coding, AI coding tools. Things like Google Opal, which is fine, AI Studio Builder, etc. They have many products, but they're not very good at capturing the attention in the same way that OpenAI are. I think Nano Banana was the only thing recently where people were like, oh, Google do AI, that's cool. And that Gemini actually hit the top of the App Store. So I think Google are in a weird position. They know they need to make the shift, but they are this massive cruise ship, this kind of gigantic boat that needs to turn around, and it's going to be tricky, and they need to get on a course where profit and even revenue has not been proven. There aren't really many Gen AI companies that are making good money. So to go from making a huge amount of cash via advertising to irregular or unproven revenue is difficult. So Google are in a very interesting position. If anyone can pull it off, though, I think it's them. But yes, they're definitely in catch up. Do you use make.com? I used to. So I used to use Zapier, make.com, NA10 to a certain extent. Increasingly, I do not, because I can just code up my own connections So when I need to connect my website to whatever and set up cron jobs and pull in information or whatever it is, I can just do it by vibe coding it. So increasingly I'm not relying on make.com or Zapier for automations, because you can just get the API from whatever make.com or Zapier have set up. You get the API key from the pieces of software and you can pull it together yourself. So I think those are also companies that are probably in trouble. Kisa says, are you real? Yes, I am. I have someone else who comes on all my streams, someone called Nat, who is convinced I'm not real. God, if I could do this fake using AI, I would, believe me, in a heartbeat. I would. I'd be traveling, but no, it is me. David Haig, thank you so much for your thoughts. Such a great follow. Thanks. Thank you very much. That means a lot. He never watches the screen. Yeah, so the reason for that is I'm recording on YouTube. So if you actually want to see my screen, and if you want to see everything in 4K, it's over on YouTube. And the reason I'm doing this is everything becomes evergreen videos, which lives on YouTube. So TikTok, I have you here for the questions, but I am mainly doing this for YouTube. That's why I'm not looking at you over here, TikTok. That is the reason for that. Speaking of which, make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. We are on our way to 10,000 followers. It is a massive grind, but we are nearly there, hoping to get there by the end of the year. And also I have a newsletter which comes out every single day, which has a summary of the news items that are covered in each of the lives, as well as the resources. So today, for example, I'm about to talk about context engineering, what it is and why you should be paying attention to it, and I'll give you a list of the resources inside of the newsletter. So follow the link in my bio to sign up for that, and make sure you're subscribed on YouTube as well. As a big fan of 2.5, this is Gemini. I'm hoping 3 will be strong when they release it. Yeah, me too. I really like 2.5. I used it. I don't use it anymore, but I used to use it in coding because of that context window, which was phenomenally large, which was very, very cool. Also, Notebook LM. A lot of people don't know about it, but I think Notebook LM is such a fantastic product. Again, Google don't market their products very well, but Notebook LM, for anyone who hasn't used it, put it up. Am I logged out? I'm logged out. Oh no, I'm logged in. So Notebook LM, excuse me, allows you to create educational projects basically. So you can pull in blog articles, you can pull in the text from books, you can pull in YouTube videos directly because it's Google, so it connects to Google, to YouTube, and then you can ask it questions. So for example, I've got one up on my screen where I was doing a demonstration talking about transformer models, and I pulled in a whole bunch of different websites. I pulled in some PDFs. You can also add YouTube videos, Google Drive, exterior documents, copied text, etc. And then you can get an audio overview, which is literally a fake AI podcast. It's really, really cool, where 2 people talk about the subject. You can create a video overview, which creates like an explainer video of the content.
All seeing it, right? The AI revolution is in full swing.
With an AI voice, as you can hear. You can make flashcards, you can make a report, you can make mind maps, you can get it to quiz you. So as a learning tool, Notebook LM is really good. That is based on Gemini 2.5. But hopefully Gemini 3 will be fantastic. I'm actually... Oh, that's interesting. In 2 weeks' time, I've been invited to a Google event. And I didn't put 2 and 2 together. It might be connected. I'm going to a Google event on 24th. Yeah, in 2 weeks' time, I've been invited to something by Google. I need to find out what it is. I'll ask the comms director. But that might be the release of it. What IDE do you use? I use Claude Code inside of Cursor. So Claude Code terminal, but inside of Cursor, just I find it a bit easier. Pure terminal, I don't know. I'm not a coder, I'm not a software developer, so pure terminal still for me is like, ugh, gross. So my setup is I have two terminal screens at the bottom of Cursor. I have one that I put in plan mode, Claude Code in planning, and that's one I have discussions with. And then I have another terminal, so another instance of Claude Code, which is my acting, my agent mode. So I will chat with one, work things out, and then kind of bring over what I've been working on into the second one. So that works really well for me, and it's all in Cursor. I've also been using, and anyone who does have a Claude account should be aware of this, Claude Code Web. Claude Code Web is a web interface for Claude Code. So if you find using the terminal terrifying, which is fair, if you've never touched code, installing Claude Code on the terminal is a bit overwhelming. It's a bit like using DOS. And if you don't know what DOS is, then you'll probably be a bit worried about it. But Claude Code Web is basically a web interface for Claude Code. So if you've used something like Lovable, it's pretty similar. You chat to it and it can set up applications for you. The only complexity, not even complexity, but is you need to set up a GitHub repository. And if you don't know what a GitHub repository is, then that becomes a barrier to starting it. I am actually going to write a guide about how to use Claude Code Web and set up your GitHub repository, set up the project, etc. I'm going to write that on Saturday, so make sure you subscribe to the newsletter. It is initially a little bit technically intimidating if you've never touched code in your life, but once you get over the first couple of steps, you realize like, oh, okay, I'm just chatting. This is nice and easy. And importantly, Claude Code, we've been given free credit. So I've been given, if you can see on YouTube, I've been given $1,000 worth of free credit from Claude Code. So I've got $1,000 of free usage, which I have to use up before the 18th of November. And if you are on the $20 a month Claude plan, I think you've been given $250 of free credit. But I'm on the $200 a month, so I've been given 1,000, which is very nice. But now I have a pressure to use it in the next 12 days. Okay, I'm gonna hop across to the next. I've been blabbing. Let me check if there's any other. He said, I know Cursor very well. Why not use Claude in Cursor itself? I used to do that. So I used Sonnet 4.2 inside of Cursor. I just find Claude Code much faster, just much faster than going through Cursor. I've also been using the Composer, which is Cursor's model, which is pretty good. Okay, I'm going to hop over to this next piece of news, which is very sci-fi. So this is from Sundar Pichai, who is the CEO of Google and Alphabet, the company that owns Google. So they are sending, this is very sci-fi, they're sending a data center into space. Because why not? So our TPUs are headed to space. TPUs are mainly Google's form of GPU. Basically, it's like a GPU. It's used for training large language models, but Google have their own kind of version. So inspired by our history of moonshots, from quantum computing to autonomous driving, Project Suncatcher is exploring how we could one day build scalable machine learning compute systems in space, harnessing more of the sun's power, which emits more power than 100 trillion times humanity's total electricity production. Yes, thank you, Sundar. The sun is quite powerful. Like any moonshot, it's going to require us to solve a lot of complex engineering challenges. Early research shows our trillium generation TPUs, our tensor processing units purpose-built for AI. Trillium generation tensor processing units. It does sound very sci-fi, doesn't it? Survived without damage when tested in a particle accelerator to simulate low Earth orbit levels of radiation. So they took one of their TPUs, again it's a chipset, they stuck it in a particle accelerator, blasted it with particles, and it was fine. Again, this is all very sci-fi. However, significant challenges still remain, like thermal management and on-orbit system reliability. So thermal management, it gets hot, especially when you are pointing an array of solar panels at the sun. You want it to get hot. That's the radiation that you're pulling in, but you need to keep your GPUs or your TPUs cool so they don't overheat. More testing and breakthroughs will be needed as we count down to launch 2 prototype satellites by early 2027, our next milestone of many. So very, very cool. Basically launching a huge array of solar panels up into space, pointing at the sun, which follows, so it would be in orbit, so it's always pointing at the sun, and those solar panels will generate electricity, which will then be used by the onboard TPUs in order to train models. So at the moment we're building gigantic data centers, huge data centers, and all of the big companies are doing so. And one of the limitations of these data centers is electricity, because training AI in particular, not using it as much, but training AI uses a lot of electricity. So one way to deal with this is to have 24 hours a day solar panels which are up in space. They are, there's no atmosphere in the way, there's no nighttime, they're always going to be pointed at the sun, and you can continue to train. So in terms of energy usage, kind of cool. It does open up questions like, oh god, are we going to start littering up space with our debris, and how expensive this is going to be, because people have said, here we go, here's a crazy idea, why not deploy proper massive solar panels on Earth to actually cover energy needs and avoid the complexity of something like this? Fair. China are basically doing this at the moment. They know that their energy expenditure is increasing because of AI, and AI is a strategic requirement in their 5-year plans. So China's like, we're going all in on AI. To do this, we need to have sufficient electricity. So they are increasing their sustainable energy exponentially, and they're doing it very well. What's been the problem with doing that in the West is land. It's very expensive to get the land because you need to get it off, private landowners. That is easier in China when you can just say, yeah, we're building our solar panels here, and what are you going to do about it? I'm sure the people are compensated, but they have the ability to move much faster when it comes to projects like this. So I think humanity as a whole will move in this direction, and this is something called the Kardashev scale, which is well worth knowing about. I want to say it's a sci-fi idea, but it's not really. It's becoming increasingly real. We have something called the Kardashev scale, named after a guy called Kardashev. I don't know his first name, sorry. But a type 1 civilization is a civilization that can harness all the resources of a single planet. Carl Sagan estimated that Earth rates about 0.7 on the scale. Carl Sagan died a couple of decades ago though, so maybe we're 0.8. But basically it's when you harness all of the energy that is available within one planet by using its non-renewables like coal and gas, burning down the trees, etc., and using the limited solar power that you can get from setting up solar farms. A type 2 civilization, which is where we'll need to move to eventually if we're going to continue in this way, is a civilization that harnesses all the power of their local sun. And this is what Sundar is talking about here, where he says, we want to harness more of the sun's power, which emits more power than 100 trillion times humanity's total energy production. Yeah, so the sun is a massive source of energy, and if we can tap into that by building solar panels around it, by harnessing solar winds using kind of wind turbines in space, etc., etc., then we can get access to more energy. So that's a type 2 civilization. And then the next one on the Kardashev scale is a type 3 civilization that harnesses all the resources of a single galaxy. Humans might reach type 3 in a few 100,000 to 1,000,000 years. Galaxies are really big. We think that our galaxy, the Milky Way, has, is it 400 billion? About 400 billion stars. How many stars in the Milky Way? Okay, an estimated 100 to 400 billion stars. So yeah, it makes harnessing a single sun seem like child's play. So this is the Kardashev scale, and it's thought, and this is a sci-fi idea, but also increasingly realistic, that we need to expand how we are how much energy we have access to, because as we expand our access to energy, we can expand our civilization as a whole. And this includes wild technologies like a Dyson sphere, which is something that you build around a sun in order to harness all of its energy. Very cool ideas, but at the moment, sci-fi. So a Dyson sphere is a hypothetical megastructure that completely surrounds a star to capture its energy output. One day. So I think this is cool, but I love sci-fi, and I can see why other people might be upset that we're going to start launching AI data centers into space. Hopping over to some questions, and then I'm going to look at, I'll probably go straight on to context engineering. Pekka says, amazing. I asked whether AI will take us to type 1 in Kardashev scale in this program 6 months ago. Yep, so this is one of the kind of promises. It's a utopian promise of getting to AGI. If we get to AGI, artificial general intelligence, we can potentially say to the AI, hey, we need to up our energy game. How do we get to Kardashev level 1? How do we get to Kardashev level 2? And it can help us work on those problems. Again, fairly utopian, but it could be the accelerator which allows us to, as a civilization, push further out from our boundaries. They will need a long cable. Yes, they will. Going to need a lot of Ethernet cables. So what I imagine is once they've trained the model up in space, a shuttle or some kind of vehicle will be sent up to retrieve basically the hard drives and bring them back down. Either that, or I've just finished, oh God, what are they called? The 2 books called Pandora's Star and Judas Unchained by Peter F. Hamilton, sci-fi books, as you can probably tell, where they use wormholes to move data. So if we can invent wormholes, that would be pretty cool too. But otherwise, we're going to have to send a shuttle up and basically courier hard drives back and forth, which does seem very, very, very basic. Or, as you say, a cable, a space lift. So glad to see others are finally getting on board, because it seems like a fantastic way forward. Yeah, I mean, the sun has a lot of energy. We can get some of it by putting solar farms here on Earth, but, well, 1, they only face the sun half the time, at most, generally less. 2, they have to, where we can put the solar panels are not necessarily near to where we are using the energy. Unfortunately, especially because a lot of our data centers are in cold climates. We put them in cold places because it helps with the cooling. There are ones like inside glaciers, for example, in famously places that are not very sunny for half of the year. So we want our solar panels around the equator, but that is not necessarily where we are using the energy. And also we have the atmosphere, we have land problems, we have many problems with deploying solar panels on Earth. It's a way to get energy, but it is more efficient if we put them in space. But then we need to get the energy back. We have questions of, are we cluttering up space? The counter argument to that is space is big, very big, so it might not be an issue, but I think it's cool. I think it's very interesting to see these kind of projects moving forward and actually becoming a reality. And someone like Carl Sagan, I'm sure, would be very excited. What's the best way to learn coding and become a technical person? Okay, great question. One caveat here, I am not a coder. I am not a software engineer. That said, I'm able to build software, and I've launched things and I've sold things, and I've made money from my software. Is it perfect? No. But I can get things to market and basically sell it. So it is doable, and you can definitely start to code yourself. What I would say, and the programmers and the coders will probably bite my head off at this, but start with vibe coding. The reason is that will allow you to catch the bug of building something. So the traditional way to learn coding is the courses, textbooks, video lessons, etc. All fine. But I find, and I've done this myself before, like when I first learned Python, I would watch a 20-hour course, but I wasn't actually doing anything. I wasn't building anything. I wasn't creating anything. So it was all very abstract. So you're learning about, dictionaries and tuples and variables and stuff like that. And that's fine abstractly, but until you actually start building, it doesn't cement itself in any way. So you have to do something with that knowledge in order to acquire the skill, because coding is a skill. What vibe coding allows you to do, and again, I'll have my head bitten off of this, is it allows you to very quickly build something and to create something, and that helps you to basically get the bug. It's like a gateway drug. You'll be like, oh wow, I just built this is really cool, and you want to show it to people, and then you'll get excited, and then you'll have ideas for building other things, and you'll realize very quickly that the first things that you built were rubbish. And that's fine. Make the first few projects a toy. Do not expect them to be like a SaaS that you're going to be making millions of dollars with. Just play around initially. Know that the first few projects will be riddled with bugs. They will be unsecure. They will be a complete mess. They will stop working after a few weeks, and that's fine, because that's going to be part of the learning process. With vibe coding, you play around. You build stuff. You get ideas to build more stuff. You publish and you show people what you're doing, and once the bug has got you hard enough, you will naturally gravitate towards needing to learn and wanting to learn a bit more about what is going on. So for example, with Claude Code, for example, which right now they're giving away free credits, once you go into the interface for the first time, you'll be looking at it and it will say, okay, connect your GitHub repository. And you might be sitting there thinking, I have no idea what GitHub is. What the hell is GitHub? That sounds rude. What's a repository? So you have to learn what that is in order to get this tool set up. Again, I'm going to be writing a newsletter on this on Saturday, basically walking you through. But you find this this kind of just-in-time learning will start to happen, where you need to work your way through a problem, and the only way to do that is to learn what's going on. So how to set up a GitHub repository, and then you might be like, well, what is that? Thankfully, we have ChatGPT, we have Claude, and you can ask. You can say, hey, I'm being asked to set up a GitHub repository. I have to go to the terminal and do such and such. I have no idea how to do this. Can you tell me how? And it will show you how to do it. And as your projects get more complex, as they become more, you're connecting more pieces, as they are getting more sophisticated, you are naturally going to have to learn more and more and more. But the way you'll be learning is, it's learning by doing, and it's learning for the sake of building your project rather than for the sake of it. So it becomes just in time learning rather than just in case learning. So I highly recommend starting with vibe coding. And then alongside, once you've started, have a look at something like, I think deep learning has some great courses. They've got a Python course, I think, and Python is very likely going to be what you want to learn. I can't pull it up. Explore courses. AI Python for beginners. That might not be what you need. Let's have a look. Okay, no, that might be useful. So this will teach you about Python. This is specifically using Python to build AI programs, which is you don't need to do. But generally, deeplearning.ai's courses are very, very good. Let's see if they just have one on Python. And you will do this alongside actually building. So it's a very long answer to say, get yourself either a Lovable or a Bolt account, mess around with it, run into problems, fix those problems, make more complicated projects, realize you need to learn more in order to deploy these projects, go and learn that stuff, use AI to help you learn that stuff, and then go from there. And then if you find this is something that's really exciting and you really enjoy doing, then take a course and do that alongside actually building stuff. Any advice? I'm building multi-agents for the first time on ChatGPT using AI to prompt. You're building in ChatGPT. You might have a better job if you build in something like Cursor. So ChatGPT will be able to generate code for you, but it won't necessarily help you to deploy that code or set up the file structures, for example, unless you're using Codex inside of ChatGPT. But I would definitely check out Cursor, and then you would basically ask the question that you just asked me. So say, hey, I want to build a multi-agent tool. How do I do this? And you use the AI to give you a project plan and to guide you through. Paint Mixing says vibe coding makes code less scary. Yes, and get started, and then you soon start to understand it. 100%. A lot of programmers and coders will push back on that, and I understand why they are doing that. But as a way to lower the barrier to entry, as a gateway drug, as a way in, I think vibe coding is really exciting. And then you can back into the learning instead of spending 6 months reading a textbook and doing courses about Python. And doing weird little exercises that don't really mean anything to you. Instead, you start building, and then you can work out the code stuff as you go along. 100%. Amazing advice, thanks. Can you actually build anything useful or complex vibe coding? Yes. So, a couple of factors here. Remember that vibe coding is getting better and better all of the time. So what you could vibe code 6 months ago was very limited. What you can create now is much more complex. Most of that comes from the architecture of the system. So vibe coding is very good at honing in on specific coding tasks. But the problem is, what happens is it will hone in on this very specific task and it will forget the rest of the code base. It will forget the overall context of what it's doing. And then by fixing something very small, like a button that's not working, it might break other stuff in the application. That's one of the main issues for vibe coding. That is becoming less and less prevalent as the models get better and as the tools get better. So when you're using something like Claude Code, for example, it will insist early on, it will say, hey, we're going to set up something called Claude.md, Claude Markdown. And we're going to put all our instructions in there, and we're going to have an overview of the code base, and we're going to put all of our kind of rules of engagement in there, and it will insist that it sets it up for you. And that means that Claude is always going back and checking, like, oh, before I do this part of the task, I need to go and check the rest of the code base and kind of make sure I'm not going to mess anything up. These kind of improvements to vibe coding are meaning that what we can do now with it is much better than what we could do previously, and that will continue. It's going to get easier and easier and easier and easier. So about a year ago, when AI assisted coding was kind of relatively new, a lot of coders and programmers were like, it's trash, I'm going to be fine. That is starting to decrease as people are realizing, like, oh god, this is quite good, and the kind of arguments against it start to shrink. And we see this in all types of AI, where initially we would laugh at the responses ChatGPT would give us for the first couple of years. We're like, it can't even write this, it can't count the R's in strawberry, stupid AI. And then as it begins to expand in its capacity, the arguments against it, based on it being bad, start to decrease. And we start to see those arguments kind of collapse, and instead we get arguments about, oh god, it's terrible for the environment, or oh, it's going to destroy the labor market, or oh, these are different arguments because the defense of it's crap is no longer applicable because AIs are getting really good. So in terms of complexity, I would say if you are just starting coding, don't build anything complex, because you will not know what the AI's got wrong. If you start with small projects first, you can have a better grasp of what's working, what's not working, and then build out from there. As you move to complexity, what you're going to be focusing on is architecture. So how all of the pieces of this tool, this piece of software work together. And then you're going to build out basically different parts of it, modules, separately, making sure they're working, and then starting to connect everything up. So I would say it's a great time to start because you will be starting at a relatively basic level, and you start with basic projects, and as you become more confident and your skills increase, the vibe coding tools are going to be getting better as well. So when you are ready to look at things like architecture and how a larger, more complex piece of software comes together, let's say 6 months, 9 months from now, the vibe coding tools will also be in a better place and be able to deal with those tasks. At some point, we're going to stop calling it vibe coding as well. Remember, the term vibe coding was only coined in, I think, February or March this year. It's a relatively temporary term. I think it's transient. We're going to use this term to differentiate from real coding, but already so many software engineers are using AI assisted coding at work, so I think it will just merge together and it would just become coding. Python format spacing was designed by an idiot. Yeah. Yes. We don't have to worry about it anymore, thank God. Just joined. What is vibe coding? Great question. So vibe coding it's a term that was coined in February or March by Andrej Karpathy. It is AI assisted coding, but with a lot less kind of care and attention from the human. So I will literally, when I'm coding, I can talk, and you can't see it, but this microphone here, I can talk into this microphone to my coding tool, and I can say, hey, I want to set up an interactive quiz on my website, and it's going to ask these people 5 or 6 questions. It's going to come up with a result. It's going to hide the result, kind of blur it out until they give an email address. Once they've given an email address, the email address is sent to my newsletter, and they're given their result, and they're given a freebie, and I can explain all of this in natural language, and I can explain it in English. And then the vibe coding tool will help me work out how to do that. So previously, if I was doing that, I'd have to write the code. Or more likely, I'd go and find some existing code in Stack Overflow or GitHub and then modify it to my particular needs. With vibe coding, we just literally we chat to, either using our voice through a microphone or typing, like on ChatGPT, our AI tool, and it will help us to build. So ChatGPT, when you're using it, can give you information, but everything is generally contained within ChatGPT. A vibe coding tool will actually access your computer. It will set up a little folder. It will put files in the folder. It will make folder structures. It will build an application for you, whether it's a web app, whether it's a app that goes on your telephone, or a desktop application. Vibe coding can help you actually create software from scratch using natural language. And there are many different kind of levels of tool for this. So there are basic ones like, got some stuff here, some swag, like Lovable. So Lovable, for example, are a very easy to use vibe coding tool where if you've ever used ChatGPT, once you go to Lovable, you will recognize the interface. It is just a chat box, and you can type into it, hey, I want to build an application that allows me to track calories and to take a photo of what I'm going to eat, and it will estimate the calories and then track that in the app. And you would type that in language, you just write that out, and it will help you to structure and format that. So Lovable is very simple. Next step above that in terms of complexity is something called Cursor. So Cursor is much more traditional in its interface. It looks like a coding platform, something called a development environment. It looks like that, but once you kind of strip away the all of the complex looking windows, you are still chatting to it. You're typing in, hey, this is what I want to do, this is what I want you to build. And Cursor is really good. It's just a step up in complexity and a step up in power. I actually, was it last week? I wrote a guide about it. If you go to newsletter, my newsletter, yes. So on November the 1st, I wrote a whole guide about how to use Cursor 2.0, which just came out last week. So that is available on my website. And then a step above that, in terms of complexity and power, is using something like Claude Code. So Claude Code is from Anthropic, the people who make Claude. It's kind of a giveaway. Claude Code you can run via your terminal, which if you're a bit older like me, if you ever use DOS is a terminal where you're literally typing out the commands. And if you're not familiar with computers, it looks incredibly intimidating. However, again, once you've got it installed, once you've got it set up, you are basically just saying, you're writing sentences like, hey, I want you to help me build an application that tracks my press ups, and allows me to do, save user information and have a leaderboard. You talk to it in natural language. So that's what vibe coding is. It allows you to use natural language, and for the coding tool to go off and just build for you. And then it will come back and it'll say, hey, this is what I built. Can you check it out? And it will ask you questions, and you go back and forth, and you build from there. But it means you do not need to write the code anymore. So this technology is obviously hated by an awful lot of programmers, because it's a threat to their jobs, because now normal people like me can build our own pieces of software relatively easily. One really cool use actually is replacing your subscriptions. So I wrote another newsletter on that on the 25th of October. So Linktree increased the price of their tool by 60%. So they took it from, from $9 a month to $15 a month. And Linktree, if you haven't used it, it's basically, it creates a page where you have a few links on it, and you can easily swap out the links. Very, very basic thing. But they're now charging $15 a month, which is, it's not the end of the world, but if you're running a business, it's just another expense. So in about 5-8 minutes, I rebuilt Linktree myself on my own website and created my own version of it, and then cancelled my Linktree subscription. And you can do the same with quite a lot of your subscriptions as well. So vibe coding is very exciting, and I highly recommend getting into it and trying it out. Oh yeah, Google AI Studio. Thank you. Great reminder. So Google AI Studio, terrible interface, but really good tool. So Google AI Studio gives you access to the Gemini models. Specifically, when you come into Google AI Studio, you're going to see a huge mess of buttons, and it's really hard to see what you're meant to be clicking on. Terrible interface. What you're going to find though is on the left hand side there is a button for build. Click that and it will take you into a much more friendly interface, which is basically a vibe coding tool. They released this a couple of weeks ago, didn't tell anyone about it. It's classic Google, but it's very good. So I can literally we'll do it now. I want to make an app that allows me to take photos of my food and give calorie estimates, for example. So we're going to use Gemini 2.5 Pro, add files, and then click build, and it will just start to build that in the background for me. This is free. So Lovable costs $25 a month. Bolt is another one, is about $25 a month, etc., depending on how much you use. Google AI Studio is free to use, and then if you deploy your app and you start to use a lot of credits, AI credits, they will charge you for those credits. But API credits cost every time you send a question, it will cost like $0.001. They're very, very low cost. So definitely check this out. Again, it's aistudio.google.com, and then click on build. If you click on build, you'll get their vibe coding tool. Thank you, Paint Mixing. That is, I forget about that. Morning, Aurora. So I'm actually building that in the background. I was going to talk about context engineering, but I think I might move that tomorrow. I've been talking so much already. So do go and check it. There we go. Wants access to my camera. So it's built me an application called Calorie Vision. It's done. However, I've just realized, okay, I've just given it access to my camera, which means my back camera has disappeared. That's probably a wrong idea. Okay, I've just messed up my YouTube stream because I'm trying to give access to to my camera. That's fine, I'm at the end of the stream anyway. Oh, I've totally broken YouTube. So I'm going to finish up here. As always, all of these videos are going to be available on YouTube. Make sure you are subscribed. And there is a newsletter which comes out every single day, which has a written summary of everything that we have covered, including links to all of the various resources and the news articles and the tools that I've talked about. So make sure you subscribe to that. It's totally free. Follow the link in my bio to get access to that. So subscribe to YouTube, please, because I want to get to 10,000 before the end of the year, and to the newsletter as well. Again, on Saturday, I'm going to be writing a guide about how to get started with Claude Code Web, which I hope is going to be useful for people who want to get into vibe coding, just don't really know how. Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow morning.